acknowledge the land on which we are meeting and calling it home. For millennia, the place we call Ontario has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples and nations who have been stewards of the land and are deeply connected to its rich cultural and natural landscape. We would like to invite you in a moment of reflection to acknowledge our shared responsibility to address past and present justices and provide space for Indigenous knowledge and world to shape the architectural landscape of Turtle Island. So before we begin, I just have a few quick announcements to make sure we have a safe and effective webinar experience. We will be recording today's webinar for education and quality purposes. To maintain a stable internet connection, we have muted all of your microphones and we have disabled your video feeds, but we do very much encourage your engagement through the Q&A window. So at any point during today's webinar, if you have questions for our speaker, please put them in the Q&A. You'll see a little box or a button at the bottom of your screen. You can enter your questions in there. Those of you who are seeking continuing education learning hours, as you know, you will need to attend 80% of today's session to be accredited those hours. And we just ask you for a few weeks. We're actually having a bit slower than normal time in uploading, so don't be worried if you don't see them there right away. We have closed captioning services in multiple languages to accommodate the needs of you. And lastly, we do remind you that our presenter today does not provide insurance, legal, or practice advice, and the OAA does not bear responsibility for errors or omissions in the discussions. And with that, I am thrilled to introduce you to today's dynamic and wonderful speaker, Gregory Henriquez.
I'm on, Claire?
You're on, and I'm going off.
Okay, bye, Claire. Hi, everyone. Okay, thank you for signing in, and I hope today will be enjoyable if we get your 1.5 credits. When the OAA asked me to do a presentation, I sort of scratched my head about what to do, and I thought the most meaningful thing that I could do was sort of talk about the 3 projects in Toronto that we're working on and give some sort of sense about what we're doing, but also how we come about designing our buildings, coming from a different place than you come from, being in Toronto or Ontario. And I've called this project Genesis because we've had a hard time over the years articulating to clients what our buildings are going to look like. Our buildings, while these ones have a lot of similarities, most of them aren't consistent with one sort of typology, be it modernist, postmodernist, deconstructive, surreal, whatever you call it. We try and find the sort of soft spot in each project to make sense of it. And so this framework that we developed, which we'll be talking about shortly, was done to articulate our process to clients. And so I think I'm going to take you through 3 projects: our Eglinton Co-op project in Scarborough, our Dundas affordable and rental housing project in Etobicoke, and our Mirvish Village project in Toronto. Before we start, I was asked if I wanted to have any polling questions that people could poll, and I have 3 questions for everyone. I think you can answer yes, no, or not sure. The first question is, do you think the federal government's Canada Builds program is going to work? Question number 1. And the second question is, do you agree that homelessness should get priority with government funds? Yes, no, or not sure. And the third question is, do you believe inclusive mixed income communities should be legislated through zoning? The reason for these 3 questions is, one is very topical about Carney's program. The other one is sort of a values question about homelessness and the priority it takes in terms of the housing spectrum. And the third one is something that our practice has been championing for the last 25 years, for inclusive communities through legislative inclusivity. And it's interesting to know whether people think that's something that should be legislated or not. Everyone pushes in their little vote, and then I'm going to move to the next stage. Next slide. There we go. Oh, okay, so people don't have a lot of faith for sure in Kearney. People, 63% think that homelessness should get priority. 25 not sure, and 13 no. And inclusive zoning, 63% believe inclusive zoning should be legislated, and a bunch of people not sure, and 6% are opposed. So interesting numbers. Okay. I'm going to go to the next slide. I'm going to try at least. Can I? It's not moving, Nicolette. Here we go. Pardon? Sorry about that. I'm going to have technical support here. Do I have to click? No.
It just wasn't clicked into the
Oh,
PDF.
okay, now we're clicked into the PDF. Okay, I've taken some liberties, and I apologize for anyone who might be insulted by this. But Genesis is obviously a reference to the first chapter of the Old Testament, and I've always thought that creation was really a metaphor for the role of the architect in society. We don't have as big a job as God did in creating the universe, but there are some parallels. In the beginning, the architects created the heavens and earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the spirit of architecture was hovering over the waters. And the architects said, "Let there be light," and there was light. The architects saw that light was good, and they separated light from darkness. The architects called the light day, and the darkness they called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. Well, like I said, our job, luckily, isn't as complicated as the creation of the cosmos. It comes with a whole bunch of issues to deal with in the process of designing a building. And I call it the world of the work. These realities that make up the world of the work have to do with the past, the present, and the future. They deal with the totality of what we want this entity to be, this new building we bring forth into the world. And this framework was created to articulate to our clients the myriad of issues that we confront in the evolution of our design philosophy. And every practice has to deal with all of these things in some way, shape, or form. Some more than others they focus on, and our practice has sort of a specific philosophy in terms of how we evolve the end product through this process. Most of our work have a lot of community engagement. We focus on the history of the site and the history of the community. Economics are always an issue when dealing with development projects or social housing projects. Sustainability is a paramount thing. We're working on everything from net zero carbon to LEED platinum to all sorts of different types of tall wood projects. And obviously the physical site and the zoning and the program and the client aspirations and issues around reconciliation with the ancestors and the people who used to inhabit this land. And our one driving sort of goal is to try and divine out of these myriad of issues two basic things: a response that somehow reconciles the myriad of the complexity of it all, but at the same time points to some sort of poetic metaphor, which allows us to develop either a parti or an idea or a philosophical attitude towards the design of the project, which will tell a story or help us make decisions about the design evolution, so that at the end of the day, what is created is unique to this site and makes sense in that world of the work. I'm now going to take you through the projects. The first project is Mirvish Village, which is currently under construction at Bloor and Bathurst in downtown Toronto. Luckily, we're getting towards the end of the construction. It's been a very long process. This project we started about 10 years ago, and I've learned more about Toronto through the process than probably I imagined I was going to, and it's become a city now that we're very proud to say we have a small studio in as well. Everyone probably on this slide on the program probably knows it's the corner of Bloor and Bathurst. It encompasses really 3 city blocks with little fragments of holdouts who well, there's a little house on the edge of Lennox who decided they didn't want to sell, and then there's one little building in the middle of Bathurst between Lennox and Bloor Street who decided they didn't want to sell as well, and they were left out of the proposal, the project. The existing site has a history which is deep within the community of Toronto. It dates back to 100 years, to the evolution of Mirvish's family's business, which became Honest Ed's over time and evolved from a series of small houses to the sort of Las Vegas-looking signage you see behind you. And he had passed away by the time we'd started the project. And I was lucky enough to go into his office. And you go into his office, and it's a massive office with framed letters from every pope that has been around from during his tenure on running the business, and tells a story of an immigrant family who created this business for immigrants and for people who first come to Toronto to buy their wares. It was an affordable place for people to get things, and its story resonated with the community, and its loss was significant, but the reality of the retail situation in the world with it had to go. It sits in a very interesting location between 4 different neighborhoods. You have the Annex, Seton Village, Palmerston, Harbour Village, and each had their own community organizations for us to deal with. It was a very grassroots public consultation process where we met with all of the different stakeholders in their houses and spent a year trying to understand what their issues were in a really meaningful way. This is something that comes out of a consultation process that we've developed in our more challenging neighborhoods in Vancouver, and we brought that to Toronto. And the program for the project started off as 100% market rental, and over time evolved into a series of incremental steps towards more affordability. We ended up offering the city a certain number of affordable units as part of the initial offering, because in Vancouver we have what's called a community amenity contribution, which is usually 75% of the land lift, translated into something on site as a deliverable. Affordable housing is one of them. And then over time, through CMHC financing, we were able to get 40% of the housing to be affordable housing, and at different sort of levels, one at 80% of AMR and other ones at 30% of the medium household income. And we're very proud to say that that's probably the first for a developer to put forward in Toronto something like this of their own fruition. The public consultation process involved not only going in and talking to people in the neighborhood in their homes and the community groups, it also had large public presentations, which we did. And Greg Lintern was very complimentary, and he said that this is probably one of the most genuine engagements that ever occurred in Toronto that he knows. And Mike Layton was also former councillor, was also very complimentary. I think the thing that I want to stress in terms of public consultation, architects often have a design before they start public consultation, and the fault in that is that somehow you're trying to sell someone something. In our sort of philosophy coming out of Vancouver is to understand, as part of that world of the work, what is it that makes this space special to people, and what are the things that they need to maintain, and sort of can be sort of metaphors or something to grasp on that will allow everyone to make sense of this and have this change in density, which is quite significant. Our client wanted a million square feet added to the site. How can we build 1 million square feet and still keep the neighborhood on side? In the end of the day, we only got 900,000, but it was pretty close. And the interesting thing that came out of the public consultation over time was not so much a fear of density, but a fear of loss of the fine grain retail, which exists along Bloor and Bathurst Street in all the little shops, in all the little, and the ability for small retailers and all different types of things to happen within that intimate scale of the street. And there was also a great love for the Markham Street houses and to try and find a way to save as many of the houses as we can. And so we came up with this idea that we'd save 22 of the heritage buildings, and then at the same time we try and divide up the site not into one large mega project, but conceptually 33 small buildings that were joined together by shared cores, and each of those little 33 buildings would have their own storefront. So the variety and the texture and scale of the streetscape would be derived from sort of this initial idea. And we came up with this typological kit of parts where we make these little buildings and we put them together to make buildings, and we started to work on the site. At the same time, we developed different architectural styles, because we figured if it was going to be like Tokyo, where you had all these little buildings happening over time on small sites, we had to do it all at once. So we had to create a whole bunch of typologies and develop our sort of kit of parts. I then went to my staff who are used to doing 3D printing and fly-throughs and all sorts of things. And I said, I don't want to do it this way. This time, I want to do it out of wood blocks. I just can't imagine designing this any other way. And it took forever for them to make me these blocks. And we created these blocks, and everyone got to make their own little design. But the essential elements around it were the same. They were all made up of these same 33 little buildings that added up to 1 million square feet. How it ended up being shaped was the result of the confluence of how to get it approved, and the planners struggling with how do we deal with this kind of height in a place where our height limit was supposed to be 6 to 8 stories along Bloor and Bathurst Street. And the way we ended up rationalizing it is one of the principals in our office, Sean LaPointe, came to me. He says, you know, there's this guideline within the Toronto bylaws that you need a 45-degree angle of daylight out of every single family house, you know, and you see a lot of these in order to, when a larger development sits beside it. And he says, you see a lot of these little steps in these little street wall buildings that all over Toronto. And he said, maybe we can apply it to this site. So we cast these 45-degree angles all over from every house. And this is the shape and form of the density that resulted from the 45-degree angles. It also resulted in more density at the corner of Bloor and Bathurst, and the building stepped down. And what you see in front of you is really 5 or 6 large building blocks that are divided up into multiple building blocks, which becomes the little micro city which we developed. And this is one of the very first models we built afterwards, trying to make sense of it all with all the different typologies. This ended up being, this is a little more density than we ended up getting in the end of the day, but it gives you an idea of the process we went through in order to design the project. It's a direct result of sort of the community's desire to have that intimate streetscape. And a trip that I took to Tokyo the day after I got the design brief as well. So there's sort of the confluence of this sort of local sort of values and this sort of experience I had, which the architect always brings their own story as well. And what happened over time is the project became very expensive to build. If you can imagine building 33 little buildings, all with different envelopes, all with different sort of aesthetics, it's very hard to imagine how it would turn out. This is a view along Bathurst. It's a sort of an elevational view. You can see the little heritage buildings on the left, couple little stragglers in the middle. Actually, in the end, there was only one, but we left 2 facades, 2 buildings there. And what happened is we came to sort of a point at which the budget wasn't working. And I said, well, why don't you let me try and do it the whole thing out of precast? And so we met with Res and Global, because you have an incredible precast sort of industry in Toronto that even ships to New York, and we don't have that in Vancouver. And I thought this would be fascinating. Maybe we can develop the kit of parts using only precast. So what you see in front of you now is the redesign of those typologies with precast elements only. And so the entire skins are done by Res and Global together, both of the two large precast companies, because neither of them could do the whole thing. And in the end, what you get is a texture and scale which it tries to emulate the idiosyncratic evolution of a street over time. While it is one project and there's no way you can get around that, we hope in the course of time, as the retails develop and it gets inhabited, you'll start to see sort of a diversity to the experience along these streets. And on the far left-hand side there's a little building that's a collaboration between us and Ian Wallace, who is a famous Vancouver artist. Here's it under construction. You can see the connection between the idea and the actual physical thing. It's further along than it was here, but you can see the two little stragglers in the middle there that we were saved. One privately owned, the other one's becoming a part of a community amenity given back to the city. And the scale of these little increments of buildings evolve and go vertically up into the towers. So each tower has probably 4 different small buildings merging up into it. The other part of the project, which was really special, had to do with the curation of the public realm. We have a very enlightened developer in West Bank, Ian Gillespie, who takes a lot of care and detail in the projects that we work on with him to make something that will be a unique retail experience, but also something which the community would be part of. We worked with the Center for Social Innovation down the way. We developed Honest Ed's Alley, which you can see in purple in the middle here, which are small micro retail spaces which are going to be used for startups. So it can be rent them for 3 to 6 months or whatever, and it can change over time. We have a market in the middle, which will be like a food offering and as well as a grocery store. We have an on-site park. We have all the little houses that are being saved and developed into little restaurants. And along both floor and bathrooms, there's small scale retail spaces, which you can see here. This is a view from above. Part of the public realm concept is to remove sort of the typical streets being pulled through in terms of the asphalt and concrete paving and sidewalks, and put small pavers, concrete pavers in different patterns like raindrops throughout the entire thing, and only allow traffic in one direction, one lane for drop off, and make it really a pedestrian environment. And so we have a mid-block connection through to Bathurst. We have a connection from Lenox going all the way up to Bloor Street, and Markham Street itself becomes spilling out with all sorts of retail and restaurants in the fullness of time. Here you can see a view of Bloor Street with the intersection on the left, Bathurst, and going down towards Markham Street in the middle with the trees. And then we own some of the little buildings halfway through to going to the west there, and with some heritage buildings and some smaller scale buildings transitioning down into the residential neighborhood there. Here's a view from Lenox, looking back up towards Bloor Street. You can see that we brought the scale down there to a smaller 4- and 5-story, 6-story sort of scale, and which is more consistent with the heritage buildings that surround it. And then it sort of starts to move upwards as you get towards the corner. And as you come around to the left here, you can see Markham Street and the heritage buildings that have been maintained and integrated into the building. Mirvish Village in the 1960s was really a hotbed for artist studios and became known as the Markham Street Art Colony. And we thought if there's some way we can maintain that, bring back that really sense of this being of the neighborhood, that would be an amazing accomplishment given the scale of the larger buildings. And so here you can see the entry in from Bloor Street coming down into that scale. There's a market opens up for the performance venue in the middle. And then the scale, smaller scale of the heritage buildings create a real community-based streetscape with all sorts of smaller retail being able to spill out. And our office will actually be in the little black building, which you see on the middle right of the screen, which backs into a Honest Ed's alley behind it. And here's sort of a night view of looking down towards downtown along Bathurst Street on the left and Bloor to the right. We've already won, I don't know, 10 awards, and we're hoping that it lives up to the publicity and that it's something that the neighborhood is happy with and gets finished very soon. I have a little video here, which is sort of interesting. I'm going to try clicking on it. Here we go, because it was done with a drone back about a year ago or so, or a little more. And what it does is it shows looking down from above, and it slowly tilts towards looking out towards Mississauga, and it sees the Harry Pontarini building bar in the bottom base, and the difference in scale between that, which was the outright zoning at the time, and our design proposition, which was approved through the rezoning. And you can see the little buildings emerging as vertical elements, sort of like you see in Tokyo or in certain places in New York as well. Okay. Our second project is 2444 Eglinton. And it doesn't have a real name yet, I don't think, but eventually it'll get a name. And it sits probably at one of the, it's in Scarborough at the Kennedy Station intersection where the GO train comes and the subway hits and the buses. There's like 50 buses per minute going by there, and there's a freeway. Eglinton becomes like a freeway at that point, and it's probably one of the most inhospitable sites we've ever been challenged with. But there is this green network in Toronto, which just sits on the north side of the site, and we were inspired by it. The hydro corridors, which sort of cut their way all the way through Toronto, and adjacent municipalities, are amazing. And many of them are inhabited by guerrilla gardeners and really become part of the backyard of some communities. And we thought if there's some way this could be an asset rather than a liability with the EMF coming off the hydroelectric poles, maybe we could make something unique. And so we looked at what the future, there's very little around there right now. You can see the one building, existing Rainbow Village in the middle in yellow, but there's not a lot of tall buildings around there. There's one proposed, which you can see on the right-hand side, of 35 stories. And in the future, different people have imagined, and different zonings for Metrolinx, and have imagined a build out which looks like something like this, which we helped develop a little further in our diagrams. Right now, Eglinton is running diagonally across the screen, and you can see the TTC transit corridor sort of slicing through there, which is the other part of our site. There's an overpass that you have to go under to get to our site, and our buildings, the idea was to have them emerge out of this hydro corridor, metaphorically. We also saw that people were using the hydro corridor to move around, to get through the neighborhood, to connect from one place to another. And if we could make this part of the sort of urban planning concept and back retail and community facilities like daycares and things like that, facing not only the Kennedy Station, but also onto the hydro corridor, maybe we could make something that could counterbalance the inhospitability, the difficult nature of the site. So here you can see some of our design narrative sketches where we acknowledge the existing site and its challenges. We have to put the parking above grade for multiple reasons. One, the site itself is contaminated, and the cost to remove it and remediate it, given our program being a co-op housing project, is impossible. But also the nature of the noise and the smog and the congestion of the freeway and all the things around them, you really want to elevate the housing up above Eglinton and up above all of it as well. So to put the parking above grade made sense, and then to integrate it into the architecture of the greenway and fold up a metaphorical green landscape emerging out of the greenway, and the towers would sit on top, floating above the sort of towers in the park concept. And you can see sort of in the middle, there's a connection through the site, which is the idea is building a road that would connect through the middle of the site to the greenway and sort of make it part of an urban landscape. And other people had worked on the site. You can see there's a project proposal by Zeidler on the top left-hand counter in 2021, which was taken to DRP, and they were told that the site was inhospitable and undevelopable. Our take on it on the right, which was brought to the DRP, moved the massing around and did two big changes. One of the big changes had to do with bringing the parking above grade and not having people live in the immediate vicinity of all the noise and chaos, to bring the smaller building towards the Kennedy Station, which is closer to the scale of Rainbow Village, to pull the larger building towards the hydro corridor, and have two co-op buildings at 43 and 20 stories on one side, and a street that connected through the middle, and a condo which may become rental now project on the right hand side, which you see there. And then, oh, here, I just want to talk one more thing. And then when we were doing the initial rezoning, we had to move very fast. We actually got this rezoning approved in about, I think, 68 days. I think it's a record for Toronto. And we placed on the outside of the building the skin, this hexagonal skin, which was meant to provide a level of scale and detail, and wasn't meant to be a final design for the building. But the world sort of fell in love with it. Our client fell in love with the idea. Alex from the Globe and Mail fell in love with it, and people said, "Are you gonna keep that?" And I said, "Okay, well, I never imagined that was the final design, but maybe it could be." And so I went back and we thought, okay, what can we do that would make sense of this project in terms of a design concept that would bring a layer of Ontario and the local culture there, but also keep the initial idea that everyone seems inspired about this building emerging from the landscape. And one of the problems of the building of this scale is how inhospitable and scary they can become as sort of monoliths sitting out in the middle of nowhere. There's no context. And so we wanted to find a way to bring some sort of joy to the building. And we knew that because of our budget being $473 a square foot, we couldn't afford the beautiful lacy steel or aluminum framework that we had originally put on the building for the rezoning. But we could afford some color, which we were doing on another project, which you're going to see afterwards. And we could probably do it in precast, because precast is something that we've gotten really good at with Mirvish Village. And if we could find a way to make it even more affordable through repetition, maybe we could find a beautiful solution that everyone would like. And so we decided that these precast buildings, which would have these octagonal shapes, needed some color in order for them to, like I said, with the flint corn, in order for them to feel approachable and not frightening, brutalist objects. And we tried putting the color everywhere, and it became sort of silly. We tried a whole bunch of different options, but what we realized is that the public realm is where the color really needs to be, and it can spill up and sort of like it explodes out of the middle of the site around the building could work as a way in which to distribute it. And so what you see here is the beginnings of some explorations on how to place the color within this precast framework. This is a view from the hydro corridor where we're proposing in this thing to plant it with corn in these giant sort of crop circles of corn to make reference to the flint corn, and to have this, you can see this daycare on the left that would spill out, restaurants that would spill out onto cafe, onto the hydro corridor, as well as the street that would come through and connect back in on the other side. This is a view from Kennedy Station. Looking across, you can see the 2 stories of parking, and you can see the buildings floating above, the smaller sort of more of a street wall slab tower relating more to the Rainbow Village on the right, and the rental building now is or condo on the left, and the largest co-op building being on the right. This is an enormous project. It has 918 units. A third of them are affordable co-op rentals. A third are co-op market rentals, and a third are either market rental or condos, depending on the market. It meets the thing that's amazing about this at the same time is it meets a One Livet planning guidelines in terms of sustainability, as well as Toronto Green Standards Tier 2. Some of the things we're doing that are interesting around this is we're using a geothermal system, which reduces the utility cost by up to 70%. We have obviously, we have all sorts of incredible sustainability within the building itself, but the biggest one has to do with the window to wall ratio being about 20%. So we have 20% openings, which is the lowest we've ever done in our practice. We have green roofs, which with a lot of outdoor spaces, and we have fabulous amenities and daycare and things like that on the site as well. And the final project I'm going to talk about is 5207 Dundas, which they've named Stella, which I'm not really sure why, but it's the name if you want to look it up anywhere. It is in it was a competition that we were hired by Tricon Kilner, a developer, on another Create-TO site. The other one's with a Create-TO site, which was the developers were Civic and Windmill, and the developers on this one with Create-TO are Tricon and Kilmer. This site sits out in Etobicoke in an area right across from where they're building the new Civic Center by Henning Larsen. It's a rezoned site, which is sort of a new downtown area, I guess, with the Civic Center for Etobicoke, and ours is in orange in the middle. The Civic Center is right across the street, and ours is going up under construction at the same time as the Civic Center. The massing that you see right there was the massing that was given to us in the rezoning. It was very fragmented and a whole series of setbacks and stepping and complicated thing to build. And we knew that in order to make it affordable, because this was supposed to be 40% affordable housing and market rental, we need to find a way to rationalize the forms and to make sense of the tectonic that we were given into something that could become both affordable and meaningful. So the rationalized form that we came up with is really a series of 4 street wall bars that interlock and 2 towers. One tower engages the podium and one tower sits above the podium. So this is a view looking from the south, looking towards the Civic Center and behind. And you can see that we kept this corridor going through the middle and created this public interior courtyard, which people can actually pass through on their way from the train station to get up to the Civic Center, but also is of use for the local residents in the building as well. And there's townhouses that face into that courtyard as well, really trying to humanize the interior of it in a very open landscape. And the metaphor we came up with, again, and this is before, had to do with the honeybee. We thought if we somehow could create this hive in the middle of this courtyard where there would be this center of activity, and we could actually, we were working with Ladia Smoke, an Indigenous architect as well, to talk about the landscape and talk about what we can do with Indigenous planting and make it of the story of Etobicoke. And she said one of the things we need to do is bring back flora that bees want, so that we create a garden again. And so the building itself became a metaphor of a honeycomb building. Here's a view of it as you approach on the SkyTrain, not the SkyTrain, on the metro. Here's a view looking across, I think, but more importantly, the interior landscape, or the inside of the building, where the beehive is going to be, is where we're going to put the color. So we kept the outside of the building very neutral and white, and then when you slice into the middle of it, you have again the color sort of emerges on the inside of the building. And so you can see a view from above. Looking back, the future buildings have yet to be built in this aerial photograph rendering. But you can see our building, where we have in the middle this connection going through the site, and the tower sitting up top, and a lot of repetition in the precast as well on this one to make it affordable. And as you come down, you get a little closer. All the rooftops are inhabited. We're even going to be putting a basketball hoop on one of them, which is amazing. This is a view looking down from the tower into the courtyard. We worked with Claude Cormier. He was still alive in the beginning of this one, and his team. And we're very proud of the landscape that was developed here with these beautiful little townhomes, as well as this meandering sort of path that merges through that people can sit, and gardens as well. Here's a view inside the interior courtyard. You can see these sort of very sort of 1960s precast sort of honeycomb looking elements, which are the townhouses, and the buildings emerging up above. The tower gets a tiny little bit of color, but all the color is really reserved for the inside of the courtyard. So it'll be something people discover. And here's a view from above St. Albans Road, up in the air, and you can see our metaphorical honeybee returning to the site, in the hopes that this project will bring back some humanity and scale and lives and body heat to this part of the world. So in closing, before I open it up for questions, I just want to, while I've gone very fast over all of these, and I'm happy to answer any questions, I've tried to sort of lean into the things that allowed these projects to be unique. The things that inspired us to make decisions about the tectonic expression, and allowed the projects to be something other than something you might see over and over again. They're unique places in the world. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Thanks so much, Gregory. That was really interesting. And I'm glad you came back to this slide. I have a couple of questions, but one specifically, I've never actually heard an architect talk about poetry. And when I think about a beloved poem, it always makes me feel a certain kind of way. So I'm curious and you can maybe touch on it for each of these three projects. What's the feeling that you want your buildings to evoke, or the poetry? Maybe you can explain it in your own language about what poetry of a building means to you.
Well, I think that each of us, when we approach a work of art, we bring with us our own story. And so when you look at something, it evokes emotions, and to the extent at which you're conscious of what the way in which you want someone to view something, allows an architect to make decisions about the design process. How you as an individual or anyone else approaches that space, you bring your own story to the experience, and you will see it differently. So the poetry is really about a way in which for us to make sense of what we're doing in our decision-making process in the hopes that it inspires other people, and maybe if they're interested, they can learn more of the genesis and the story behind it. But more importantly, hopefully it inspires them to question the built environment, their environment, and to enjoy it in some way that is not typical or monotonous or the same as other places. I think what separates poetry from let's say, the newspaper is that it forces one to step outside of one's daily life, and it forces one to look inward and say, why is this the way it is, and why it doesn't make sense to me as something of substance or meaning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of breaks our typical patterns
Mhm.
through. And I know that feeling of when you walk into a space where it changes your experience. Yeah, and I'm curious, I know you showed the picture of Mirvish Village and the history, and you spoke just briefly about the history. And I'm curious about if you're thinking about the past, but also thinking about the future. And if you kind of had a magic wand, we were talking a little bit before we started about magic wands and zoning, and we'll get into zoning. I have a question about zoning. If zoning weren't an issue, if all of the other bureaucratic processes weren't an issue, what kind of future would you envision in terms of like how communities could be built? And like, what do you see as something that would be very helpful for specifically Toronto? I know you don't live here, but from your time here as maybe an outsider too.
I think I think Toronto is an amazing city. I think the thing about Toronto that makes it so interesting is the diversity of cultures and the richness of the urban experience. The streetscapes are gritty, they are filled with culture and different ethnicities. I think finding ways in which to maintain those and at the same time do something that is of this time in this time is really a difficult task, but an important one. Most development processes are large-scale abstract zoning and density calculations. And in Toronto, your rezoning processes are very envelope-based. They're not, you design, people do rezonings in Toronto with very little information about what the end product of the building really will be like compared to, let's say, a city like Vancouver, where our rezoning process mandates a design which is far more detailed than you do even in SPA, like 3 times more detailed than SPA. And so the pedestrian experience or the materiality or the design evolution of any project in Vancouver has to go through that larger sort of evaluation during the entitlements of the zoning. And in Toronto, it doesn't. And so the challenge for Toronto is how do you bring those things in later? How do you have those things come later? And your planning department works really hard at trying to get them in later. And that's their goal. But somehow to integrate those things together in the fullness of time in Toronto would be interesting. And the thing that made Mirvish Village so interesting is a developer came from Vancouver with a Vancouver architect to us, and we brought with us our same attitude as we do in Vancouver, and we designed a whole project in the rezoning phase, every down to what restaurants going where in some of them as ideas, right? And that's something that can't be done everywhere, but there are lessons learned there about the questions one needs to ask at a micro level to inform the macro.
Yeah, and that was my other question. And also just for those of you on the call, now is your time. You'll see that button at the bottom of the screen to put in a question. But yeah, if you can maybe speak a little bit more, that's very fascinating to hear Vancouver considers these nuances more than Toronto. But maybe if you could speak a little bit more about the differences between the zoning or rezoning expectations in Toronto and Vancouver. So
Yeah, I think also you're a much bigger city, right? And so the scale at which the rezonings occur are massive, a lot of them, right? And so it's a whole different landscape. Where Vancouver is a tiny little I'd call it a hamlet of 800,000 people, right? It has Greater Vancouver's 2.5 million or whatever it is, but the city itself is quite small, and so the large scale tracts of land that one sees in Toronto being up for development, or even projects like you see here, are rare and few and far between in Vancouver, and so. How to translate what we do in Vancouver into Toronto isn't easy, and I don't think it should be done. I think Toronto needs to move fast to deliver the housing that it needs for the projected growth, which is significant in Toronto, and I can't pretend to have answers to how to do that, but I can say that I think the federal government program will address some homelessness, but may not tackle the larger issue of the industry and how to get it back up and running. And so I think that's going to be left to other forces, which I'm not really in complete understanding of how it's going to happen, but it may be a series of small things that change the landscape of that. In Vancouver, we're continuing to develop faster because of our tourism market, and I have, let's say, 6 hotels in our practice right now because people want to come to Vancouver and visit, right? So I don't know what the soft spots are in Toronto in terms of those sorts of things, but you're going to have to find ways in which to keep people employed and to build the housing with uses that can make economic sense of the political reality and economic reality we're facing.
Yeah, I know. Well, there's you began the presentation talking about some of those more kind of the policy issues and what drives that. But yeah. So I'm not seeing any questions coming in. And I am, there's just a lot to explore here. There's like so many aspects of the last building that you showed us with the honeycomb and the building, like, and bringing in, maybe you can tell us a little bit more what it was like to work with an Indigenous consultant or architect, and did you have any insights from that you've been able to like translate into your other work, or were these very specific to the site?
Well, I think this one, Lady Smoke, was brought in probably too late to the process, so we only could deal with the landscape. We have other projects in Vancouver now where we have Indigenous consultants brought in the very beginning. We have advisors from different bands that come in. We bring in public artists like Brian Jungin or Susan Point now in the very beginning of our projects, and they can get involved in the genesis of some of the ideas of the buildings as well, and how the public realm is going to develop and acknowledge the shared history we have on this land. It's complicated because while there are a few really amazing First Nations Indigenous architects like Eladio and Alfie Wah with Formline, and you have some in Toronto as well, amazing talent. They can't do every building, and so working in partnership with some of them is going to be part and parcel of the future of many practices as well. And you can see that like in the new Vancouver Art Gallery, Formline and from Vancouver is with KP Corbell, Payne McKenna Bloomberg are partnering to do our new Vancouver Art Gallery, which is very exciting. These are new uncharted times, and we're all learning, and we're all coming with sort of an open mind and to try and understand how to deal with reconciliation in a way that's not physical, but also has to do with creating jobs. It has to do with acknowledging the economic reality of these Indigenous peoples who need to be housed as well.
Yeah. That was beautiful. Just that image of the honeycomb really resonated. Okay, so we have a thoughtful comment question from Craig. He says, thank you very much, Gregory. Beautiful work and great explanation about the constraints. For Mirvish, you essentially had the opportunity to build a master plan carrying 33 sites. In retrospect, do you think it would be strengthened by including 33 different architects? Wow, it's a lot. Your design seems to be striving for this degree of pluralism. He's not saying this as a critique, but as a comment we all struggle with.
Oh, for sure. It's it's for sure. If we had time for 33 different architects to do each building, it would be great. I'd love to try it. We have one project where the client originally started off with 3 or 4 different architects. Us being one of them. One architect, Gensler, was going to do the retail. Another architect was going to do another piece, and we were going to do the residential component. And little by little, it wheedled down to just us being the design architect for the entire site with all the buildings again. It seems to be that the need to move quickly and get things approved sometimes takes precedent over the sort of complexity that would come from multiple architects being involved. So I would love to do something like that. If Craig, I don't know your last name, but if you want to collaborate in something in Toronto, we're all in. I think finding a way to get more diversity in our projects in terms of the public realm is really important. And given the scale and of some of the projects that we work on, this is something we struggle with. And Mirvish Village, we were able to do it because we had a client who was really interested in the micro retail and let us save all the heritage buildings and let us integrate them all. But ultimately, it's not 33 different buildings. It's probably, there's 4, 5 towers and 1 street wall building, and then 20 houses, and then whatever. There's, it's a whole bunch of little things. And we did bring in Diamond Schmidt to help us as architect of record in the execution of the working drawings, and there are other architects working on the insides of different parts of it, and the interiors, and Bate Sorba's doing the market, and we're happy to collaborate with other people.
Yeah. Great.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to the what you spoke about public consultation. I wanted to find out if there's anything that had surprised you when you went through that process that you weren't expecting.
Yeah, I guess it was like when I do public consultation in Vancouver, which over the years, it's extremely confrontational in Vancouver. Like there's a lot of very serious local community groups who have very strong feelings about things. And it often can result in public meetings that are very combative, and you struggle through them to try and make sense of what the right thing is to do sometimes. And it's healthy, it's democracy, and we have public hearings on every one of the projects where they can speak to the councillors directly about it as well, right? In Toronto, we held this big public meeting at the Park Hotel just down the street on Bloor Street with, I think, hundreds of people came. And at the end of the presentation, there was this everyone clapped, and it was very polite. And that surprised me. I was I couldn't believe it. I thought I've never experienced anything like that in my 40 years of doing this. So I was pleasantly surprised by the response to community engagements in Toronto. It could be a function of there not being as much as Vancouver, and people take it for granted in Vancouver. And Toronto, people are just grateful that someone was asking them questions. But it's interesting. It's a different world there. You have so many things going on. I can't imagine how planning department could cope with that many public consultation processes on each building.
For the Eglinton project, is that the same? Was there public consultation for that project too?
Not the same. It was pre-zoned by Create TO.
Okay.
And you were handed a massing, which we rationalized and added a few more stores to the towers, took down some of the street walls, and we rejigged it and went back for a little text amendment, which they brought to council in an hour, and it was waived. It was like it was very expeditiously done.
Mhm.
We did have some public outreach to First Nations communities involved in sort of things they wanted to see in terms of community services or types of things they wanted to happen. So there was some of that done through a public engagement process, but to the same extent of like this, if you look at this, this is not, there's no real neighbors here other than those cars going by and the GO train or whatever that is, right? It's not a neighborhood like the annex.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Right.
have the same constituency with people who are is invested. The same can be said of the Scarborough project. While we did talk to the one building, obviously to the east, it sits there. It's basically in an industrial wasteland out in Scarborough. That one, with some strip mall beside it.
Do you think you'll be doing more co-op type or affordable rentals in your
Oh yeah,
practice? Do you see more of that coming in your practice?
we do a lot. We have a lot of affordable housing in our practice. Co-op is something that hasn't been around for a generation. Like our last co-op I think we did was in 2005, and CMHC shut down funding, and BC Housing even didn't have co-ops. They started doing a different type of model of affordable housing. But this is coming back into fashion again, and this will be the largest co-op in a generation, which is, I'll show you, go back and we'll go to it. This will be the largest co-op in a generation, right? Which is enormous, right? And you can see that we've taken liberties with the underpass here to try and we still have to deal with Metrolinx to try and clean it up so that the connection across doesn't look anything like this now, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
I'm shocked that the annex, your consultation didn't involve a lot of animosity. That it must have been well managed by the city. That's all I can think of. But
yeah, and also we went into people's homes and had community meetings and we didn't design it until we met with them, right? Right. And there was a very so I'm going to call it a interesting demographic in the leadership of a lot of these communities. There were a lot of university professors. There were because it was close to there was a lot of left-leaning sort of values. And at the time, there was no one proposing rental housing in Toronto. There was only condominiums, and so this was really the first public offering of a major rental housing project in Toronto. No one was doing that. And you can see here a lot of the sculpting that was done to make to transition into the neighborhood more consistent, with the scale of the neighborhood and the larger mass going towards the corner intersection of Bloor and Athers. So that was an authentic listening moment for sure.
yeah, we're all really looking forward to that corner opening up again in Toronto. So I'm not seeing any other questions. I think we can, unless Gregory, you had any parting thoughts that you wanted to share.
No, just want to say thank you to anyone who showed up, and that it's been a pleasure with working with you, Claire and Ashley, and hope everyone has a nice day.
Right. Okay. Well, before we completely sign off, I've got a couple of some small announcements. Really great discussion. That was a really thoughtful comment, and for your comments after the presentation. We do have a presentation next week, October 9th. Sorry, tomorrow, which is not next week, carbon and net zero on low-rise residential sectors. So it's sort of like similar themes. We've also got another webinar on October 30th in the risk management scheme of things, which is also 50% off for people on a budget. And that one's about professional responsibility under municipal renovation. So there's a new bylaw. We've got a lawyer coming in and explaining that process for everybody and giving a bit of context. So I highly recommend, if you haven't already signed up for that webinar, if you're in the Toronto area doing any kind of work, very, very useful. Again, as I mentioned, we'll report your hours on the OAA transcript. You do not need to report it yourself. We just, again, ask for a little bit of patience with our uploads, which is taking maybe a little bit longer than normal. Finally, we will be distributing these beautiful slides to everybody who attended, and a link for feedback for Gregory. I know we already got some feedback on the chat, so that's great. But if you'd like to share anything else, we would love to hear that. And that's it. Everybody, please have a great rest of your day. And thanks everyone for attending. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.